There is no spoon. This is not a spoon. We all know that. We've seen the famous line.
Try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
So what is it? It's just a long piece of metal with a swoopty-scoopty part at the end. And it just so happens that this is a useful technology if I want to eat liquidy foods, soups and stews and cereals. It works pretty well as a technology of what we call a spoon. But that's only because this thing that I'm holding in my hand possesses the necessary properties that it needs to be good at being a spoon. I know this all sounds very convoluted and stupid. I'm getting to a point. The point being, if somebody else were to come along, like a government, and say that this is no longer a spoon, something else is a spoon, well, that doesn't magically stop this thing I'm holding from having the properties that make it good at being a spoon, right? Let's say the government came along and said, we're gonna hold all those spoons for you. You don't need the heavy metal ones. They're not efficient enough. We have better spoons that are more convenient, easier for you to use. So we're gonna hold all these heavy metal ones. We're gonna give you new spoons. The government issued spoons, maybe they're paper or plastic. They generally work fine as being spoons, but they might not be quite as sturdy as this, right? But human beings still know, they used metal spoons once upon a time, and they know that this thing is sturdy, it lasts a long time, and it works really well at being a spoon. So if I had a paper spoon or a plastic spoon and its properties weren't quite as good at being spoony, humans everywhere will probably still be in search of better spoons. They'll still be working on inventing better spoons. They'll still be working on finding other materials they can use to make better spoons. So even though the government issued you a plastic spoon and they call it a spoon, you know that it's not that great at being a spoon. It's not as good as this at being a spoon. But something else weird happens. What if they come around every year and they say, we need to take 2% of the material out of your spoon. We need to just make it a little bit less good at being a spoon, but only by 2%. You'll still be able to eat soup, but we need to do this. It's important. It's important for the greater good. It's important for everybody who has a spoon. We need to be able to use that material to make new spoons, but everybody's better off if you let us come by and take 2% out of your spoon. You're like, it's only 2%. It's not getting that much worse. You can still eat the soup. You can still eat the cereal. I guess it's not that big a deal, right? But your spoon's getting a little bit less effective each year, and deep somewhere in the cognitive recesses of collective human mind, you remember that this once existed. You once had the metal spoon. It worked really well. It didn't lose any of its spooniness. It was durable. You loved eating soup out of it. It never melted. Nothing ever went wrong with this bad boy right here. So if this was all way too convoluted for you, and my desperation to use a matrix analogy was too much, if you haven't picked up on the analogy yet, the spoon is money. Just because the government calls something money doesn't mean that that thing automatically has the properties it needs to be good at being money. Just like if the government were to take this spoon, give you a knife and say that's a spoon, the knife doesn't have the properties it needs to be good at being a spoon. So just because the government gives you paper money and tells you that it's money, doesn't mean the paper money automatically has the properties it needs to have to be good at being money. Paper money does not have the properties it needs to have to be good at being money. Government issued money does not have the properties it needs to have to be good at being money. There's a few different reasons, but the biggest one is that paper money can't store its value because governments will keep issuing and printing more of it. So just like my stupid spoon analogy, where every year they come by and say, well, we just need to make your spoon hold 2% less soup every year, they're going to tell you that your money needs to lose 2% of its value every year. And that's for the good of the economy, for the greater good. This has to happen or everything will collapse. This is ridiculous. So just like in my spoon analogy, human beings won't just accept that a knife is a spoon because the government says so and start trying to eat soup with it. They will find ways to make their own spoons or find other things that they can use as better spoons if the spoons the government gave them suck. So if the money the government gives you sucks, human beings will realize that it doesn't store its value very well, and they'll go in search of other things to store value in. Well, this has a few different effects, but one of them is storing value in things that we shouldn't really be using as stores of value. Housing is the perfect example. Housing is a utility good, and basically everybody in society would be better off if we just used it as a utility good, but instead we're storing our value in it because we can't store our value in money. So we're hoarding houses and keeping them away from people who need them to live in them so that we can just hold our purchasing power through time. But another thing that happens if we don't have good enough money, people will try to invent a better money. Money is a technology that's changed throughout time. So paper fiat money, that hasn't always existed. That's not the way money always was and the way it always will be. That's an experiment we're doing right now for a few decades. And like I said, it's probably not going to work. because it doesn't store its value, and human beings keep looking for other things to use as money because they're like, well, this money sucks, it doesn't work. So what some people did was try to invent a different form of money that they could use and that the government couldn't stop them from using. So it would store its value over time, and the government couldn't tell them that they weren't allowed to use it, or they couldn't stop them from using it more accurately. And that new thing is called Bitcoin. It's an evolution in the technology of money. It's a money that was invented to solve the problem of paper monies not storing their value. They don't store their value because governments print more of them. So Bitcoin is a money that you can't print more of. So it's designed to store its value into the future. And it's designed in such a way that governments can try to tell you can't use it, but they can't actually stop you. It's pretty clear to me that once that thing is invented and sort of released into the wild, like I said, humans don't just necessarily listen, oh, the government says a knife is now a spoon, so I have to eat cereal with it. That doesn't work. The government says crappy paper money is now money and you have to use it. Well, you'll use it when you have to, like pay your taxes and things like that. But if you can find a better thing to use as money, you will, and more people will, and then eventually that thing will become widely used as money and the government won't be able to stop it. So this is just like a very simple explanation of why Bitcoin will continue to be adopted as money. It's better at being money than what we use as money right now. Therefore, it will continue to slowly outcompete things that are crappier at being money. Just like if everybody was using a crappy spoon that held 2% less soup every year, and somebody invented this awesome metal spoon and made it so governments couldn't stop you from using it, more and more people would just start using this better metal spoon. If they had a choice, they would be like, I'm going to use the crappy plastic spoon. The government steals 2% of its material every year. They would just say, I'm going to use this really good durable spoon and buy one and it's last me forever. And I can eat infinite amount of soup into the future. So I don't know if that was just a dumb analogy, but I wanted to use it. Let me know if you like this video. Let me know if you like the setting here, standing in a plant. I talked about how the spoon is long and has a swoopty end. I didn't go in depth into the properties of money and why Bitcoin is better money. But if you want to know more about that, I have a video you can watch right here. And, of course, as always, you never forget, Bitcoin's inevitable.